Once again, good evening, everyone. You're listening to Red Pill 78. As always, I am Zak the Corruption Detector, and this is another edition of Red Pill News. I hope everyone's having a lovely day. We've got lots of news to go over, so let's just get right into it. First of all, we are going to meet one of the central operatives in the color revolution, the purple revolution against President Trump. His name is Norm Eisen. He worked in the Obama administration, and he's had his sticky little fingers inside many different pieces of this coup to remove the president. We're also going to be taking a look at what could potentially be the next phase in that coup to remove the president, which would be former and active members of the U.S. military. And speaking of that coup, Peter Strzok has written a book, and he's out doing the interview circuit. He was just on Face the Nation, and we're going to be talking about the content of that interview, and we've got a little clip from it. And if you'll remember, just a few months ago, as the lockdown was beginning, Senator Dianne Feinstein was one of the elected U.S. officials who potentially acted on information allowing her to commit insider trading. She certainly thought she was in the clear, and a lot of people thought that nothing was going to happen, but the FBI has made a move on Senator Dianne Feinstein and ordered her to hand over all documents related to her husband's stock trades. We've also got an update on the two Biden supporters who attacked that 7-year-old boy. They have charges against them now, and you're gonna like what you see. And finally, it looks like we have two more important police resignations. In Dallas, the chief of police has resigned, and in Rochester, New York, the police chief and the entire police department command staff have also resigned. It no longer makes any sense to be a police officer in these Democrat-controlled areas because they are not allowed to do their jobs. All right, guys, we're going to go over all this and more, so please sit back, relax, grab your popcorn, and we'll be right back after a brief word from our sponsor. You know, for a lot of people, life has never looked so uncertain as it does right now. And across this country, people are being paralyzed into indecision, hemming and hawing about everything, feeling flustered and shutting down, avoiding that issue, the money one. But bleak as it may look, there may be a silver or even a gold lining. If you've worked for years before CV-19, you might have an old 401k or even an old IRA sitting around gathering dust that we can help you with. Working for your old company when it could be working for you. And we're not talking peanuts here either. Some plans have thousands of dollars in them. To find out more about unlocking your own hidden treasure, call the team at Noble Gold at 877-646-5347. And if that's not incentive enough, Noble Gold are giving away the U.S. Mint's own solid silver 5-ounce, $1 Apollo 11 moon landing coin with each qualifying gold or silver IRA. So it's worth jumping on the phone and calling 877-646-5347. Once again, that's 877-646-5347. Tell them Red Pill 78 sent you. And remember, when you support my sponsors, you support this channel. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. First of all, today, we are going to be talking about this man on the screen right here, Norm Eisen. In past shows, we've discussed the ominous similarities between the strategies used in the past by the U.S. government in conjunction with covert agencies, George Soros, and various NGOs like his Transition Integrity Project and others to bring about regime change in countries that our State Department has deemed to not play ball, or in cases where simply the people have elected the wrong leader, like our Donald Trump. Now, an example would be the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, where the State Department employees and Trump impeachment witnesses like George Kent and Marie Yovanovitch likely had their hands in the endless barrage of protests and demonstrations which were done in response to the contested election of Viktor Yanukovych, who just happened to best the Western-backed Viktor Yushchenko. Now, basically, the preferred candidate of the State Department lost, and with the help of a variety of agencies and NGOs, they helped facilitate his overthrow and removal with the help of the Western media. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should. If you'll remember, Victoria Nuland, Obama's Assistant Secretary of State, was captured on tape discussing Joe Biden's role in shaping the new government that they were trying to usher in, which makes the current situation sound all the more surreal. The use of peaceful protests and unending fake news coverage, combined with non-governmental organizations and charities like BLM and Antifa, is a recurring theme. Only this time, instead of taking place in Ukraine or Belarus, the Never-Trumpers are using the same tactics here on American shores to remove President Trump. So who is Norm Eisen? Well, he's the former ethics czar to the Obama White House. He's a Harvard law grad and a participant in the recent war games played by Never-Trumpers and Obama loyalists who fantasized about the possibility of President Trump refusing to relinquish the office should he appear to lose in November. He's also the mastermind behind the strategy to sue the president and his allies into bankruptcy. He wrote 10 articles of impeachment a full month before the Ukraine call even took place. He was also a guiding hand in the amplification of the Russia hoax, and he actually served as co-counsel for the DNC while they were litigating the impeachment. He also created a handbook for the mass mobilization of racial justice protesters designed to overturn Democratic election results. Basically, Eisen is behind every stage in the effort to delegitimize, demonize, criminalize, and overthrow President Donald Trump. And he honed his craft over the years, taking part in these color revolutions. He even wrote a manual entitled The Democracy Playbook. It's all there. The exact same techniques used by the exact same people are being used today on the 45th president of the United States. So what do they do if every other tactic that has worked in years past fails to work in this instance? Well, they bring in the military, current and former agents who are willing to take part in what can only be described as a coup to remove our duly elected president. Well, it's starting to look like the next phase in the Purple Revolution might just involve the U.S. military. Back in June, we saw President Trump's Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. He went publicly against the president by calling a press conference and refusing to allow U.S. troops in the form of the National Guard to be deployed onto the streets. He said that, "I say this not only as the Secretary of Defense, but also a former soldier and a former member of the National Guard. The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire situations. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act." Well, I'd be interested to know what Secretary Esper has to say now that we've gone through several months of unrest and widespread destruction across the country. Now, at this time, protests were only in their 10th day, but senior military officials were lining up to voice their opposition against President Trump and his administration. President Trump certainly holds a high regard not only for the military, but for all men and women who serve their country in some capacity or another. This is in stark contrast to the regard that former President Obama held for the men and women serving our country. Now, one of the first signs that President Obama was definitely not a fan of good strategy in the military was when he fired General Flynn. General Flynn called out Obama because of his terrible policies and because he was trying to make a deal with Iran while at the same time shipping weapons to ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Now, Obama targeted him, and ever since then, he's been caught up in this web of people trying to destroy his life, all of them Obama devotees. Now, President Trump attempted to bring the military into his administration. He brought in Generals Mattis, Kelly, and McMaster, and don't forget, it was McMaster who brought in the individual who was the apparent mastermind behind the Ukraine impeachment. All of these generals were suspected at one time or another to be a leaker inside the White House. They were directly contradicting the administration. They forgot their oath of office and the chain of command. It's pretty obvious that these generals were not apolitical as they are supposed to be. They were working directly for these Never-Trumpers and this Purple Revolution. They want President Trump out, and they may be willing to go so far as to engage in a coup. Now, remember back in August, there were two former military lieutenant colonels who wrote a piece in a military publication, Defense One. And in that piece, they urged General Milley to prepare for a coup if President Trump does not leave office in 2020. Now, they said, as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you are well aware of your duties in ordinary times to serve as principal military advisor to the President of the United States and to transmit the lawful orders of the President and Secretary of Defense to combatant commanders. In ordinary times, these duties are entirely consistent with your oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. But then they go on to say that we are not living in ordinary times, and they claim that President Trump is actively subverting our electoral system and that he is threatening to remain in office in defiance of the Constitution. And they urge General Milley to prepare for the fact that he may have to engage in a coup to remove President Trump from office. Now, everybody knows President Trump loves the military. President Trump is a big supporter of our men and women in uniform. Now, on Labor Day, he made some very interesting statements. He claimed that the soldiers love him, but that the generals who want to make money with U.S. arms manufacturers do not. Let's take a listen.
Well, President Trump has reiterated his election push for law and order, claiming to be loved by soldiers. In a White House briefing, the president said he felt Pentagon seniors would not have felt the same way because of his success at preventing wars.
I'm not saying the military is in love with me. The soldiers are. The top people in the Pentagon probably aren't, because they want to do nothing but fight wars so that all of those wonderful companies that make the bombs and make the planes and make everything else stay happy.
So President Trump wants to put an end to the concept of endless wars. What is that going to do to these generals? Well, it's essentially going to bench them. The president's remarks are fairly bold, even for him. But make no mistake, I think the president knows exactly what's going on. I think that he's aware that there is a possibility that certain members of the military, both current and former, might be willing to engage in a coup to remove him. But I think he's counting on the fact that the boots on the ground, the good men and women who make up the bulk of our military, are not going to allow it to happen. Now, keeping in mind, this all comes after that Atlantic hit piece last week, which tried to claim that President Trump did not respect those men and women, calling them suckers, saying that they were stupid people for putting their lives on the line for citizens that they do not know. Well, I think this was clearly designed to try and turn the tide against President Trump. If they can convince the military brass to want to remove him and the service members of the military who are under their command, then it's far more likely that they will be able to engage in this coup as the last stage of the Purple Revolution. President Trump needs our thoughts and our prayers on a daily basis, and we need to continue to make our voices heard. We will not forget our oath to the Constitution. We will not allow our president to be removed in a coup fitting a banana republic. All right, next, Peter Strzok, one of the other architects of the coup to remove President Trump, is now out with a new book, and wouldn't you know it, it slanders the president some more, and the corrupt media is pushing it and allowing him to come on the air and spew his lies. Now, Strzok was, of course, the key investigator for the Obama administration attempting to prevent President Trump from winning that 2016 election, and then to have him removed from office once he was in office. Peter Strzok is out with a new book where he continues to push the Russia collusion scam and, of course, besmirch the president. Now, the book itself is said to span and recap the entire arc of the Crossfire Hurricane investigation from the perspective of this creepy guy that you see on screen right now. Now, he said that he didn't necessarily perceive Donald Trump and his administration to be criminals, but just that they were compromised by a foreign adversary. And he says that he doesn't think the FBI truly got to the bottom of it because they weren't allowed to go through Trump's business records in the way that he wanted. Now, he claims it started as a pure counterintelligence inquiry, an attempt to understand who, if anyone, on Trump's campaign team had been offered help by the Russians to undermine Hillary Clinton. And it goes through a series of claims that we know to be factually false to this day. This did not start with the statement shared with a guy who shared with a girl who shared with the FBI. Spying on President Trump had began long before Alexander Downer came into the picture, and people like Strzok and others were working diligently on setting up members of the Trump team for months before Downer's discussion with a young and impressionable George Papadopoulos. With the audacity of a criminal, Strzok claims President Trump is a national security risk in an interview on Sunday morning. Let's go ahead and look at the clip.
I want to talk about the investigation into you, the investigation into the investigators. Attorney General Barr has launched it. He handpicked John Durham, the investigator, to look into it. We're supposed to hear before the election, before November, so this is an important question. You're at the center of it, potentially. Have you been interviewed?
I have not.
Are you a target or a witness?
Well, I'm certainly done nothing wrong, so I'm not worried about whatever he may find. If he finds the truth, I'm not worried.
Do you expect additional indictments?
With regard to government employees working on the case, not at all.
All right.
Peter Strzok seeming to come off as a smug, self-important little jerk. He doesn't believe that there will be any further indictments, and he believes that he did nothing wrong. However, I think it's pretty obvious that he did, and I think it will be also obvious to U.S. Attorney John Durham and to Attorney General Bill Barr. Now, what's really funny about it is that the left-wing fake news media is treating Peter Strzok as if he's some type of an honest guy. He is a real legitimate source, giving some type of insight into the machinations of the FBI's investigation into President Trump. However, they don't mention anything about the fact that while he was an employee of the FBI, he was also an employee of the Clowns in America. And I haven't heard anybody mention yet that secret task force being run out of Langley by John Brennan himself to investigate President Trump well before the official investigation began with Crossfire Hurricane at the FBI. Now, Mark Meadows has quite the opposite opinion of Peter Strzok when it comes to the idea of his wrongdoing. Now, he is a former congressional investigator, as we all know, and he told Maria Bartiromo on Tuesday that he does not have an update on Durham's work, but he noted that the records he has viewed reflect very poorly on FBI officials who were involved in the origins of that operation, which was looking into President Trump and any ties to Russia, which there were none. Now, he said additional documents that I've been able to review say that a number of the players, the Peter Strzok's, the Andy McCabe's, the James Comey's, and even others in the administration, are in real trouble because of their willingness to participate in an unlawful act. And I use the word unlawful at best. It broke all kinds of protocols, and at worst, people should go to jail, as I mentioned previously. I second that motion. Now, the problem is that President Trump was on the wrong side of the Obama justice system. If you're not a Washington Post insider, and if you wish to work for the American people and the rule of law rather than China or the cabal or massive corporations or the social media giants, you're on the wrong side. Obama created a biased Justice Department that was led by crooks and criminals like Peter Strzok. Strzok should be in jail based on the acts that we know he committed and probably on many more that have not yet become public. It's really difficult to even see his face and listen to those words. You can't look at him without thinking about that little dance that he did while testifying before Congress. Americans want justice, and many people still believe that the Justice Department is not capable of dispensing justice because there are still people there who are holdovers from the Obama administration. However, many of them have been removed, and I truly believe that Attorney General Bill Barr, with the help of U.S. Attorney John Durham, are going to bring this case to justice. The people behind it that broke the law, that attempted to remove President Trump from office, they're going to face the music, and it's only a matter of time. Kevin Kleinsmith was only the first. Remember, we have several more placeholders left to fill out on that board. Now, speaking of justice, it looks like the FBI is perhaps about to dispense some. They have moved in on Senator Dianne Feinstein and ordered her to hand over all of her documents related to her husband's stock trades. Now, she got paid a visit from federal agents, which involved her husband, Richard Bloom, wanting information over his decision to unload stock ahead of the CV-19 outbreak. That's called insider information, and Feinstein's husband is no stranger to shady deals. That's how how they are so rich. As the New York Post notes, Bloom's company, CBRE, was selected in March 2011 as the sole real estate agent on sales, expected to fetch $19 billion. Most voters didn't even notice that Bloom is a member of CBRE's board and served as chairman from 2001 to 2014. Now, of course, Feinstein denies that she had anything to do with the U.S. Postal Service's decision to choose that company, and this is not the first time that her husband has come under fire for engaging in crony capitalism. Back in 2013, a construction group, partially owned by Bloom's investment firm, scored a construction contract for California's high-speed rail project valued at $985,142,530. Now, that obviously went nowhere, so where's the money? The California Democrat also purportedly handed over documents to federal agents to indicate she had no involvement in her husband's decision to sell off between $500,000 and $1 million in a biotech property, Allogene Therapeutics, just this past January. Now, a spokesperson for Feinstein told the New York Times Thursday that the FBI asked her basic questions last month about stock trades made by her husband, and added that the senator provided requested documents to federal law enforcement that show she had no involvement in those transactions. The 86-year-old California senator sold at least $1.5 million in stocks following a late January briefing on the beer virus, but has denied any wrongdoing and has said that all of her assets are in a blind trust. Now, the sale, which just happened to coincide with the stock trading at its 2020 low, came shortly before the market tumbled because of the beer virus pandemic. Feinstein's admission came on the same day that Senator Richard Burr temporarily stepped down as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee because of an ongoing investigation into his unloading of stocks in February. Burr is not only facing a Department of Justice probe, but one from the Securities and Exchange Commission as well, and they made the announcement after the FBI seized his cell phone in Washington, D.C. Law enforcement officials are supposedly attempting to establish a timeline of when the senator decided to sell upwards of $1.72 million of stock back in February, and at the time, Burr was receiving nearly daily briefings from the Senate Intelligence Committee on the CV-19 threat. And of course, there is speculation he may have acted on information privy only to members of his panel, in the exact same way that Dianne Feinstein and her husband did as well. This, of course, is a developing story, and I eagerly anticipate updating you on it as we get more information from not only the FBI, but Senator Feinstein herself. Time for some more good news. I'm sure that everyone remembers that horrible day back in August when two supporters of Joe Biden attacked and assaulted a 7-year-old boy, and they stole his MAGA hat. Well, it looks like they have been hit with hate crime charges. Now, the little boy on screen, Riley, was attacked for wearing a red MAGA hat. He was heard on the video begging his mother to call 911, and his mother said, "Get off the property. Are you going to destroy my property?" It was insane. And the women responded, "Yes, we are." One of the Biden supporters then grabbed the child's red MAGA hat and refused to give it back to him. His mother didn't want to back down, and she chased them. The two women were later arrested and charged with numerous crimes, including robbery and assault of the little boy. And on Tuesday, the two women were indicted on hate crime charges in a Wilmington, Delaware court. Their names are Olivia Winslow and Cameron Amy, both 21. They're from Wilmington, and they were indicted by a New Castle County grand jury on charges of second-degree robbery, second-degree conspiracy, endangering the welfare of a child, third-degree assault, attempted third-degree assault, offensive touching, and felony hate crimes. They became famous, and not in a good way, when they stole that poor little boy's hat, and I bet you they're going to think twice about doing that in the future. Well, they're probably not going to be allowed to be around children in the future, considering the way that they treat them. This is incredible news, and it is a major victory for people in the conservative movement. This poor little boy did not deserve the treatment he received from those women, and I hope that people on the left will think twice before attacking a child in the future. All right, and finally, in the latest examples of police chiefs and others in departments resigning from their jobs, Dallas Police Chief Renee Hall has turned in her resignation letter after 3 years on the job, but it doesn't stop there. The police chief in Rochester and the entire police department command staff have suddenly announced their retirement following the riots over the weekend. This announcement comes after several days of riots and violence in response to a body cam footage showing a March incident involving Rochester police and a 41-year-old black man. Now, this is the same place where we saw footage of rioters tossing tables at restaurants, throwing chairs, intimidating the restaurant goers. It was a really, really disturbing sight to see. Now, the police chief, his name was LaRon Singletary, and he put out a statement saying that he was honored to serve the city in upstate New York for 20 years and commended his staff. However, he said the protests and criticism of his handling of the investigation into that March 23rd incident are an attempt to destroy my character and integrity. As a man of integrity, I will not sit idly by while outside entities attempt to destroy my character. The members of the Rochester Police Department and the greater Rochester community know my reputation and know what I stand for. Mayor Lovely Warren informed the Rochester City Council that in addition to Singletary, the entire command staff announced its retirement on the same day. She noted that none of the police brass were asked to resign. Deputy Police Chief Joseph Morabito was also among those retiring, and he had served on the Rochester Police Department for 34 years. He said, "It has also been my honor to serve this community through these many years, a community I was born and raised in and deeply love." Now, violent militants took to the streets of Rochester on Friday night. They destroyed restaurants, they sent diners running, and then roved into residential neighborhoods. They climbed on people's homes in the middle of the night, and due to the current climate in this country, the Rochester Police Department was hamstrung and not allowed to do anything about it. This is what happens when you don't allow your police to do their jobs. Criminals roam the streets, and perhaps they will all retire, because who wants to be a cop when you can't be a cop? All right, everyone, that's all I have for you today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am Zach the Corruption Detector, and this was another edition of Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless. Hey guys, one more thing. I just want to thank everyone for watching today. If you have not subscribed yet, I urge you to please consider subscribing. There will be a couple of videos that pop up if you want to continue to watch. There's also some ways in the description of this video that you can follow me on other platforms. Please consider doing that as well. And if you want to support the program directly, there are means to do that below as well. Thank you all for your support over the last couple of years. Consider liking and sharing this video and help me get the real news to people who don't yet know they've been lied to.